a nerve, she the flag. Woman, she's a lover and a fighter and a king and a mother.
Feeling that song. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you submitted your answers. I will give you the answers to those questions in just a moment. But first, I want to see how the donations you're making this evening are going to help the QLaw Foundation. Remember, the QLaw Foundation is a sister organization to the QLaw Association that runs all sorts of fabulous community resources, like the LGBTQ+ legal clinics. The foundation made a video to show you who they are and what they've been up to. Let's go ahead and roll that video.
To me, QLaw Foundation means caring for our community and making sure everyone has access to legal support and protections.
QLaw Foundation helps to bridge the gap between legal aid services and the LGBTQ+ community. I'm so grateful to work for such an amazing organization.
We're QLaw volunteers.
I love being an extern at QLaw Foundation.
Hello. I love working at QLaw because I get to bring the best of me to work every day and create accessible legal resources for my community. And because working with Denise is the bomb.
I support QLaw because everyone deserves the right to live, work, and thrive free from discrimination.
I support QLaw Foundation because it helps strengthen our community.
I'm proud of the work that QLaw Foundation does, and I'm proud to be part of the QLaw Foundation family.
Thank you, QLaw Foundation, for doing our second parent adoption. You were absolutely wonderful, and we couldn't be more grateful.
I'm Denise Diskin, Executive Director of QLaw Foundation, and we're part of the QLaw family. We provide legal support to LGBTQ communities all over the state of Washington. When all was said and done, we did over 200 appointments at our LGBTQ legal clinic last year, and we're closing in on doing almost 30 adoptions. And we do things like hire skilled queer community organizers like Alphonse Littlejohn, who you saw in this video, to bring our services to community. And just this month, we won an outstanding victory at the Washington Supreme Court. I don't know if you heard about it, but we won a result that dramatically limits the ability of religious employers to use homophobic and transphobic religious beliefs to discriminate against their LGBTQ employees. You might think that for this amazing work, we get funding from IOLTA or civil legal aid, but for the most part, we don't. There's not enough to go around, and we're not just another legal services provider, because we are grounded in fighting racism and centering LGBTQ community strength, resilience, and interconnectedness. Individual donors, you, your friends, your rainbow family, you are the people who keep us afloat. If you want to see us back here next year with more court victories and thriving services, please donate generously tonight and help us center LGBTQ communities in justice.
We're part of the QLaw family. Thanks so much.
We're all part of the QLaw family. The QLaw Foundation is
We are family. I got all my sisters with me. We are family. Get up, everybody, sing. Everyone can see we're together as we walk on by. And we fly just like birds of a feather. I won't tell no lie. All of the people around us, they say, can they be that close?
Can't stop dancing 'cause we are family. Yeah, 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 yeah. Oh my gosh, Denise, your aqua colored frames. I am living for them. Oh my goodness. Let's go ahead and check in on how those donations are going, because of course we came here to raise some money for QLaw Foundation. So let's take a look at our progress. Okay. Oh, wow. It's growing. It's growing right before our very eyes. And oh my gosh, we've raised just over $9,000 in support of the foundation. Remember, our goal is $15,000. So Keep those gifts coming in. Now, I know you're probably waiting on those trivia answers. Lots of lawyers in the crowd. Somebody has told me that you tend to be a little bit competitive. You're probably especially wondering about that last question since, we're here to support the foundation and you're like, just how amazing are they? How many clients have they served? I am going to up my gift based on that amazing number. I bet that's exactly what you're thinking. And I bet you were saying it exactly in that weird voice. I don't even know what that voice was. Anyways, I am going to read the answers to you now, and my backstage helpers will calculate which of you amazing humans won. We'll let you know who the winning table is at the end of the show, so you got to stay tuned. Okay, here come the answers. Question 1, the answer. Marcia P. Johnston and Sylvia Riviera were principal organizers of the Stonewall riots and deserve credit for igniting the LGBTQ+ rights movement. Question 2, the answer. The Corner Bar. You thought Ellen. I know you thought it was Ellen, because I kind of did too. The Corner Bar was the first TV show to feature an openly gay character named Peter Panama. Of course he was named Peter Panama in 1972. Question number 3. Le Rao. Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe. They have 5 gold medals between them. Question number 4, Bostock involved a funeral home director, a social worker, and a skydiving instructor. If that's not diversity, I don't know what is. And question number 5, the QLaw Foundation's legal clinics served 205 clients in 2020. What? QLaw Foundation rocks so hard. Yes, they do. So how did you do? Do you feel like you're a winner? Tell me in the chat right now. People are saying, woohoo. Jennifer says, woohoo. Jennifer, you're feeling confident. You're feeling confident. Do you feel like you did well in the trivia? Anthony is just shouting for QLaw Foundation. Oh, Alphonse says 4 out of 5. By the way, Alphonse, your video, beautiful. I'm just loving everything about you. Okay, very good. Now, this is the moment you've been waiting for. We're excited to bring to the stage a keynote conversation with Josh Rivers, the host of Busy Being Black, who will be in conversation with our own Josh Trabig. Now, in a segment we're calling Between Two Joshes. Please welcome to our virtual stage, Josh Rivers and Josh Trabig.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Sasha, and thank you, Beyonce, for singing us in. I'm very excited to be with you here tonight, Josh Rivers.
Josh Trabig, I'm so excited to be here with you and with the QLaw Association.
Well, the first thing I have to ask, turning the tables on your usual show, how's your heart?
There are 2 questions that I use on Busy Being Black all the time. The first is to open and the second is to close. The first is how's your heart? And the second is what do you hope for? And to close the show. And I ask these questions because I don't necessarily know how to answer them. So I'm trying to gather information from the community. But what I will say is that my heart at the moment feels really full. It's Aries season, which is my season. My birthday is on the 1st of April. I feel super energized. Lots of great things are happening in my life, but also in the lives of my friends. And I'm kind of like the biggest cheerleader for my friends. And so to see them, being successful and for things going in the direction, I feel so energized at the moment. I'm really rooting for them. So I feel good. I feel really good. How's your heart?
It's I think feeling similarly. It's it's always a complicated place. The world's a mess, but I'm really excited to be here. I've got a lot of hope, so I'm pretty happy to be here.
Yeah, well, and I think what I've found is that people, there's a great sense of guilt, I think, over the past year, because many of us are in positions of relative privilege, right? I've got a roof over my head, I've got income coming in. None of my family has been directly impacted by COVID-19. And I think I have felt, and certainly many of the queer Black people I've spoken with, there's been a sense of guilt. I feel good even though the world is crumbling around us. And this isn't to say that I don't have moments of absolute, utter despair, but that there's this kind of sense of guilt that those of us who aren't on the worst end of this almost feel guilty for having lives that are going well. So I just wanted to name that and put that out there as well, that that'll be something that people are feeling.
I completely understand that. I actually lost my job last year, but I felt bad even complaining about it because it lasted much longer than a lot of people. And I was given plenty of notice, so I was able to deal with all of it, and I've got a new job coming. So I definitely understand that feeling of guilt. Well, I know that you and I could just talk about Beyonce all night, but the real reason that QLaw wanted you here was the breadth and uniqueness of your perspective on contemporary culture. So as a big fan, first-time interviewer, could you tell us how you started Busy Being Black, how you think about the guests you're going to invite, and how do you craft those conversations?
So Busy Being Black really emerged out of a really personally traumatic time in my life. And I was really unsure about my voice, about what power my voice had, about whether or not I could make a good impact in the world. And at my absolute lowest moments, I was surrounded by largely queer Black people who were taking me out for dinner and taking me for a glass of wine, or coming over and making me food, or just hugging me. And they were giving me really incredible advice and sharing with me wisdom. And a few months into this, after this event, I thought, my God, people need to hear this. They need to hear what people have been through and what they think about the world and how they approach life as queer Black people, knowing full well that the experiences of queer Black people can be limited or mediated by living under white supremacy. But these conversations also revealed to me that there was a great deal of joy and joy finding, right? It was what all of my guests have in common, they have in common with these people who came around me, was that there's a really active pursuit of joy. And so I just wanted to package that in some way and share that, because I think, and I hope, that Busy is the resource that could have helped me when I was younger. So that's kind of the goal of the show. And I find my guests largely because I have a question. So I'll be reading a book and I'll be inspired and I'll have a question about it and I'll reach out to the author and they'll say yes, or I'll think of something, esoteric and random. And I'll think, who can help me answer this particular question? Because I think if I'm asking questions, other people will have the question too. So that's mostly how the show comes to be, is that a question pops up in my head and I find the person to help me answer that question.
I love that. One of the things that's always on my mind is this supposedly unique place that we're in space and time, where we talk about 2020 as if it's a distinctly meme-worthy place and time. But we know that none of it was really that unique, that loneliness and isolation was a pandemic before COVID even arrived. And social media has both connected us and left us more isolated than ever before. The movement for Black Lives has never captured more headlines, but nothing about the police killing Black people is new. What do you make of the last year?
Well, I think it's important to say that, absolutely none of this is new. But we are also allowed to acknowledge the uniqueness of 2020 as part of a whole, and that something did happen. Many things did happen in 2020 that changed perceptions, actions, it changed all sorts of things in ways that it hadn't done before, even though the issues, the actions weren't new. Does that make sense? I think that there's this real drive to kind of, and as someone who says that police violence is not new, I do feel that there's this drive to diminish what happened in 2020 as if it hasn't completely upended the world. And I think the reason that that Black Lives Matter, that Abolish the Police, that ACAB, that all of these things that were so niche before got such global attention was because people had nowhere to go. They had no choice but to look at their phone, to scroll, to follow the links. And so what we were provided with, the opportunity of 2020, is that for those of us who had access to the internet and to technology, we had the time to actually follow the breadcrumbs and to listen and learn in a way that we didn't have time to do before, right? We were working and socializing and trying to be fit and have romantic lives. And that really all kind of was cleared out, I think, for many of us by COVID-19. So I think we have to acknowledge that this 2020 and the ongoing crisis that is COVID-19 provides an opportunity for us to really see what's happening in the world around us. Now, of course, the frustration is that those of us who are paying attention and who have been paying attention are frustrated that the change isn't happening as quickly as we'd like it to. And I don't mean changes in like, we're not going to bring down governments overnight. We're not going to bring down white supremacy overnight. But I think what we do hope, and sometimes where we're a bit overly optimistic or a bit, dare I say, misguided, is that what we're seeing on social media, the information sharing, the knowledge sharing, the personal experience offering, that's going to trickle down into the streets. But I was talking with my friend DeRay, and he was saying that, at the height of abolish police protests, it was all you heard. It was in the news, it was on social media, it was all you heard, abolish the police. But DeRay and his colleagues did a survey on the ground in Minneapolis. And something like 74 or 75% of Black people in Minneapolis didn't want to abolish the police. So he said, whatever's happening online isn't necessarily translating into the real world. So I think that's the frustration that emerges out of 2020, is that that's what is the same, right? Is that social attitudes are not changing in time with the scale of the abuse, the violence, and death that we're seeing offered to us by the media all the time. So does that make sense? I feel like I kind of went a bit.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I see so many different intersections between the racism in the US and in the UK, and just the way it's appearing in the news right now, from the criticism of tabloids and the royal family's treatment of Meghan Markle and the accompanying racism. And while that's still big news, there are protests in the UK against a bill that would give the police greater capacity to crack down on peaceful protests, but it's barely a blip in the US press. We were toppling statues of Confederate leaders in the US, and they were toppling statues in Bristol of slave traders. And I've heard commentary, British commentary, comparing our countries, saying that on the one hand, the UK didn't have pervasive enslavement of African peoples at home, and therefore doesn't understand or maybe doesn't need the racial reckoning that the US is facing. But on the other hand, that because the enslavement of African peoples wasn't so pervasive in the British Isles, that racism never was confronted the way that the US did through the civil rights movement and ever since. And so that therefore there's even more urgency to actually address contemporary and rampant racism. How do you see that our two similar but very different countries confronting the legacy of racism?
Well, the first thing to say is that the people who normally say that racism is different in the UK and the US are white people. Because Black people across the board say, no, it's bad everywhere, And I think, again, like the past year has really revealed the kind of fault lines and the insidiousness of British racism. Now, I think British racism is unique in that white British people are particularly good at feigning ignorance and at this kind of blustering, bold-faced refusal to confront even the word racist. I mean, you saw Piers Morgan walk out of his television show. I mean, you see white people just descend like into utter discombobulation in England when the R word is even uttered in their presence. And there is this real fragility around it. But, one of the things that we've done at UK Black Pride is part of our narrative over the past year was to really drive home the fact that, people keep saying that police violence isn't a thing in the UK, but yet over 1,500 Black people have died in police custody since the 1990s. So that's not true. More recently, we've seen the police brutality against Sarah Everard. Now, what's irritating as a Black person in Britain is the real global attention that Sarah Everard got, right? And rightfully, of course, everyone should be totally outraged that a woman was walking home and was accosted by a police officer nonetheless. But that, a few weeks earlier, two Black girls had also been mishandled by the police, in that their bodies were, police had taken selfies with their bodies at the site of the crime. Like, this disgusting behavior from the police, and they just don't get the same airtime. People just don't care. And so when we talk about the different ways that racism apparently manifests, well, actually they manifest in really the same ways, right? That this anti-Blackness, this narrative is the same in the US and the UK. In the US, we have the KKK and white nationalists and kind of, very beautifully defined images of what we think a white terrorist looks like. In the US, you can see like, oh, that guy's gonna probably be KKK or, shoot someone. And in the UK, you don't have that kind of like definitive white racist. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like, there's no racist personality, as it were. And I think that might be the difference, but they really manifest in all the same ways. And I think we see that in the UK in the school to prison pipeline. So there's reams and reams of data that show that Black boys are expelled at 4 times the rate of white boys in school, that the prison population is disproportionately Black men. We have the same prohibitive, damaging policies around trans people in prisons. The Gender Recognition Act here in the UK is being, gutted. I mean, it is draconian in so many ways. And for whatever reason, England has managed to brand itself as somehow less racist, less homophobic, less transphobic, when actually it's right up there with the worst in the world.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And thinking more specifically than just the US, here in Washington State and in Seattle, where I am, we are Seattle's one of the widest major cities in the US, I think only behind like Portland, which is not that far to the south.
I'm laughing because it makes total sense, but it's not a bad thing.
But I think in that way, people outside of and in Seattle think of it as a very progressive state. We're reliably voting blue. Much of Seattle is extremely welcoming to to queer people and many different communities, but there is a denial that the racism is there. It's confusing, I think, to anyone who's paying attention how folks can think that Seattle or Washington is just free of the racism that we see blasted across the headlines about the rest of the country.
Yeah, and I think there's this expectation from so many, myself included, Black people within the queer community, that here will be a safe haven, right? Here will be where we're accepted. And I think this is where Busy Being Black comes in and feels like an important intervention. Because we simply don't have enough spaces where queer Black people can hold each other, can talk to each other about spirituality, about love, about rejection, about addiction, about sex, about poetry, in ways that are expansive and capacious and allow for us to show up fully as ourselves. And this expectation that the LGBTQ community, which is largely, wherever you look in the UK or the US, is largely white, right? Unless you're in like Black majority cities like Atlanta, where there's no choice but for the scene to be Black. There's this expectation that gay means white. And so I don't think that Black people have any misconceptions about what Seattle or Portland is, or what the scene in London is. Like, we imagine, and we find out very quickly, that it is dominated by whiteness. You know, and that's at a micro level. At a macro level, gayness is represented as white. You know, if you look at LGBTQ media here in the UK and in the US, it's the same, right? I mean, there are a few publications and platforms doing it a little bit differently, like them. But for the most part, we're seeing the same images over and over again. And even when we are delivered images of Black people, it's within a very specific expression. You know, we get the pose Blacks, but we don't get, you know, the intellectual Black gays, or we don't get the thug Black gays that aren't on the down low, or, you know, like there are very limited expressions of Blackness and queerness that are acceptable within mainstream gay culture. And I think that's part of what we all have to challenge. And what I'm hoping to challenge with Busy Being Black is that we show up in many, many, many different ways. And there's space for all of us.
Yeah, I think one of the things we've discussed before is that the image of Black folks in the media is just so predominantly negative. Not just the disproportionate way that the news covers any sort of crime occurring where the alleged criminal is Black, but that, you know, it was only recently that a Black person won one of the major Oscars for anything other than playing a slave or oppressed person. And I think one of the things that's been really important to me, particularly over the last year, is to really try and surround myself with images of joy. And I've certainly gotten that out of your podcast, and, you know, just finding different Instagram accounts to follow so that my feed is full of all kinds of different images and beauty and hopefulness. And it really, I think, helps counter the predominant message that we're given so much. So to close out, what can you tell us what's bringing you joy?
Well, first I want to address something in your statement, which is that, you know, those who listen to the show regularly will know that I always talk about Kevin Quashie's The Sovereignty of Quiet, because it was one of the, you know, we all have one of those books that like transformed our thinking. I've got two: Mario Miele's Towards Gay Communism and Kevin Quashie's The Sovereignty of Quiet. And in The Sovereignty of Quiet, Kevin Quashie makes the argument that Blackness is always supposed to tell us something about protest, democracy, America, and that what we lose in this construction of Blackness is what he calls the wild and voluptuous interior life. And so Busy Being Black is an exploration of that. It is an exploration of the wild and voluptuous interior. It's a moment for us, queer Black people, to see ourselves talking about ourselves, thinking about ourselves, imagining our futures in ways that are not defined by, restrained by, or limited by white supremacy or white people. And that for me is a huge part of the show, is that we see ourselves, or the show shows us as we are every day, right? Because absolutely, we're fighting against everyday microaggressions, but that does not become the sum total of our lived experience. But the questions that we're asked by media, the ways in which we're portrayed by media, suggests that that's all we do, is answer questions about racism and discrimination. But so many of us are writing poetry or making art or having meaningful conversations. And so I think Busy Being Black is important for that. And that's what brings me joy, is finding people who are showing me what it means to document the minutiae of our lives, who are sharing with me the books they're reading, the poetry they're reading or making, who are offering me new ways to think about things and look at the world, and who are sharing, right? There's a communion that happens that I think is beautiful, and that gives me a great deal of joy, because our communities are vibrant and wonderful and beautiful, and it's an honor to be able to capture their experience and their experiences and their voices.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, and thank you so much for joining us today. I know we really
Josh, hold on. I got to ask you a question.
Yes.
So to close, I normally ask all of my guests the same question, as you know. What do you hope for? And I don't get to ask a lot of white people what they hope for because the show's mainly Black people. So Josh, to close, I ask all of my guests the same question. What do you hope for?
I think, like you said, that can be kind of a difficult question to answer. I think in the grand scheme of things, of the grand, larger world, as we were talking about at the beginning, that I'm hopeful that the progress that we've made over the last year, socially, politically, the capacity of folks who want to work from home and need to work from home to just be able to do it, that the things that have been improvements to our lives are not temporary. And I hope that the amount of agitation and awakening that's happened, particularly in a lot of white people over the last year, is not temporary. I really hope that it's ongoing and that it's finally leading us a little bit closer towards social transformation. I think personally for myself, I'm really hopeful that in the next year we're able to see our family some more. It's been rough not being able to see our friends and family, not being able to give people hugs. There's folks on the QLaw board who I've never met in person because our whole existence has just been remote. So I'm kind of an introvert and a little bit of a loner sometimes, but I really miss just being with people, and so I'm really hopeful for that to return.
I think it's such a beautiful question to ask, right? It's such a nice way to get people to tell a bit more about themselves, and I think that's part of what's so endearing about that question. Everyone is so interested. Well, not everyone, but so many people are so interested.
Well, I hope that we can meet in real life and kiki on a beach somewhere really soon. To everyone watching, you can find Busy Being Black anywhere you get your podcasts. And Josh, where else can folks find your work?
You can follow me on Instagram _Josh Rivers and on Twitter _Busy Being Black. And of course, visit busybeingBlack.com where you can find more information about the show.
Well, there you go, folks. Like, follow, and subscribe. Thank you again, Josh, so much.
Josh, thank you. I've really enjoyed this.
Back to you, Sasha.
Josh and Josh, that was a rich conversation. That was a lot of truth telling. And it felt very powerful. And I could tell that it was landing with you, the audience, very powerfully, because, oh my gosh, I've been just looking at the chat and you all are having some very real conversation in the chat as well. White supremacist violence, white supremacy being written into our institutions, that's our OG pandemic. And this is white people's problem. We have to fix this. We are it. It's our job. And I saw somebody say in the chat that people make time for things they want to do, things that they care about. And we have to make time for this. That's the call of this moment, friends. Okay. On that note, on that powerful moment, let's keep this show rolling. Now, it is my pleasure to bring to the stage Kellen Haid, the president-elect of the QLaw Association. Hey, Kellen. Hello. Come join me on stage. Tonight, you and I were beautiful like diamonds in the sky.
Hey, Sasha.
Hey, oh, look at your golden flare. What? You are bringing it, Kellen.
You are an incredible liar. Thank you. Well, hey, thanks, Sasha. And I am honored and humbled to be the QLaw Association's president-elect. Thinking back, it's QLaw Sweet 16. And it's amazing to reflect on how the landscape has changed since the first banquet back in 2005. The very next year, in 2006, our state Supreme Court issued its decision in Anderson versus King County. And in that case, a majority of our justices held that a ban on same-sex marriage was constitutional. But thankfully, Justice Fairhurst's dissent turned out to be quite prophetic. because less than a decade after Anderson, and with support from allies like you, Referendum 74 passed, marriage equality became the law of our state, and Judge Mary Yu presided over the first same-sex marriage in Washington on her way to become Justice Mary Yu of the Supreme Court, where she both made history and a questionable law clerk hiring decision. Now fast forward to 2019, when a unanimous Supreme Court, the same court in Anderson, held in State versus Orleans Flowers that businesses cannot discriminate against customers because of who they love or how they identify. Our state's bench has continued to diversify on all levels, including the High Court, which has added Justices Whitener and Montoya Lewis, both of whom QLaw has been honored to have as keynote speakers in the past at our past events. What a difference 16 years can make. And I'm told if you have teenagers at home, that will really resonate. But there's still a lot of work to be done, as we all know, and as all our speakers have alluded to tonight. Last year was a stark reminder about how powerful the legal system is in the fight for social change, both in its ability to promote that change and unfortunately also in its ability to suppress it. The COVID pandemic has had and continues to have a disproportionate effect on the LGBTQ community, particularly those of color, in areas like housing and employment. And we still have a ton of work to do on trans rights. And as the Josh has just talked about, isolation within the queer community was amplified by, but certainly not born from, 2020 and COVID-19. So what's QLaw going to be up to this year? We will continue to advocate for legislation like the Equality Act and SB 5313. We will continue to rate judicial candidates and educate both the bench and the bar so they're not only aware of issues that our community faces, but they also think about how those issues impact us. We will continue to strengthen the QLaw family, as Denise said, and support the foundation as it delivers its essential community service. We will continue to work with our law firm and our corporate partners like T-Mobile to develop pro bono programs to help members engage with and give back to their communities. We will continue to stand with other minority bar associations to denounce violence and hatred against anyone wherever it is found and work with them towards the goal of a more equitable and inclusive profession. And we will continue to create opportunities for LGBTQ legal professionals to meet and connect and to talk to each other. And most of all, remember that we're not alone. Now, none of this occurs in a vacuum. I know I speak for all of our board members and volunteers when I say that we are very privileged to be building on the fantastic work of those who came before us. Many, many people worked very, very hard to build QLaw over the past 16 years. So thank all of you. And thanks even to, I don't know, former QLaw Association presidents who have since thrown a punch or two at me as opposing counsel. You know who you are, Zeta Bugayas. And speaking of fantastic work, can we please bring Josh and Sasha back to the stage? Hey, oh, you guys are here.
You're here.
Josh, you know, you're a tough act to follow. And not only because you look great in your gold jacket, and Sasha, of course, you're stunning in glitter and gold, and I look like I'm dealing blackjack at the Golden Nugget. It turns out not all gold blazers are created equal. But Josh, the real difficulty is following someone like you who has been such an integral part in shaping this organization. For those who don't know, Josh has been a fixture for many, many years. He first joined the QLaw Association board in 2015 as a law student. And you have the distinction, and hopefully the only person to hold this distinction, of presiding over 2 virtual banquets. But you've been a fantastic steward of the association, and especially in these unprecedented times. And it's a cliche for a reason, Josh. But that just highlights, honestly, the lasting impact that you've had. In an era of Zoom fatigue and worrying about loved ones and just honestly trying to stay sane with kids and partners at home all the time. Love you. Josh was a calming presence and just kept us organized and motivated. And above all else, you never let us lose sight of QLaw's fundamental purpose and the reason why QLaw exists. That this minority bar association is meant to support LGBTQ students, legal professionals, and the community at large. So thank you, Josh, for everything that you've done and accomplished, and the countless hours and passion and energy that you've invested in QLaw.
Thank
you.
Now,
typically, oh, of course, yeah. And typically, right, we'd be up on stage, and this would be the point where I'd hand you a commemorative gavel, or maybe an IOU for Beyonce tickets. And I promise we'll make that happen soon. But for now, I'd like to toast you, our volunteers, our sponsors, and all the QLaw Association's allies. Honestly, thank you for your continued support. We could not do it without you. And we look forward to working with all of you in the coming year. And dare I say, I'm not supposed to say this, I was told not to, but dare I say, see you in person for the 17th annual banquet in 2022. Cheers.
Cheers. Yum. Thank you, Marination, for this tasty drink. Cheers, Josh and Kellen. Thank you so much. Now, let's go see how we're doing for our sisters at the QLaw Foundation. We're going to take a peek at our fundraising thermometer. And when I look away from your beautiful eyes, that's because I'm looking at the fundraising. Okay. Oh my gosh. Yes, yes, yes. We have made some great progress. We have raised just over $11,000 towards our $15,000 goal. And I have to get a little closer here. I want to thank Lydia, Melissa, and Steve. Is that Jenny? I think it's Jenny. And Anonymous. Anonymous. You're so generous. Anyways, thank you all for your gifts. This is amazing. Please, if you have it within your ability, please do keep those gifts coming in. All right. Got to sit down my drink, my pink drink. Now, friends, speaking of gifts, I'm ready to give you some gifts. Yes, I am. We have a list of all the eligible tables who got our trivia questions correct. And in a little bit of analog theater, I have this here, handwritten note. So fancy. Are you ready? Are you ready? Do you want to know who won the trivia? Do you? I'm not seeing any enthusiasm in the chat about finding out who the trivia winners are. So maybe you don't want to know, because I could just, now you do want to know. Okay, good. I thought so. Okay, drum roll. I'm making a drum roll with my feet. The winners are seated at the table titled Attractive Nuisances. That would be Chase, Bonwell, Julissa. I think your name is Ratchor? Sorry, Jalissa, if I said your name wrong. And Tracy Flood. And what do you win for being the amazing table that won the trivia? Well, you're going to win tickets to next year's gala. Emphasis on the gay. All right, here we go. We're going to do our drawings now for the other awesome prizes. Now, what I have here is some very sparkly gold cards. The sparkly gold cards are numbered 1 through 9. There are 9 of you entered in this drawing, selected by our backstage team. So I'm going to mix them up. Oh, yep, QLaw works. You're right, QLaw does work. You better work. Mix the cards. Work it, Sasha. Mix them up. Okay, I mixed them. No cheatsies. And I am going to draw a card in just a moment. But I want to tell you, our first winner will win a gift box that is from Savor Seattle. Sorry, I have to set down my card so I can show you some cool stuff. The Savor Seattle box includes so much awesome stuff, and this is just some of it. We've got some yummies from Macrina Bakery. We've got some uncured lemongrass salami. I almost called it sausage for the boys out there. And some Wild Peaks chocolates. Yummy, yummy, yummy. And also monorail espresso. Now, that's just 4 of the many items in this fabulous box. And here I am coming to get my deck of cards again. And here we go. The first winner is going to be the person numbered number 7, We're going to come back to that in a moment. We're going to come back to that in a moment. That number 7. Okay, our next winner is going to win the gift certificate to Terra Plata for $250, which was donated by our presenting sponsor, Lane Powell. Congratulations to number, which one feels powerful? Which one feels like a winner? I don't know. Is it this one? Number 9. Hey, number 9. Okay, we'll come back to that in a moment. And our next winner is going to win. Ooh, this is very sexy. This is very sexy. Look, this is a Canlis gift certificate in this very nice and oh so chic box. Oh, yes, it is. Oh, Canlis, we love you so. And that is going to go to the winner, number 3. Okay, and I already talked about the Seattle Saver package, but we also have an Amazon gift certificate. And if we don't just love gift certificates in adorable little boxes, I know I do. Isn't that charming? Isn't that charming? This came to us from Stoll Reeves, who actually gave this to us for our 2020 fundraiser. But as you may recall, there was a little nuisance that popped up and made us cancel. So I'm going to draw for that one, mixing up the cards. I'm not even looking. See, not looking, mixing, not looking. Here we go. Gonna draw this card right here. Whoopsh. Number 5. All right, friends, those are our winners. I will read those numbers again, 7, 9, 3, and 5. And do we have the slide that shows the names of the people? Do we have that slide? Okay, so number 7 is Karen Hold, I think that says, but you know, I'm over the age of 40, so tiny print is hard for me. Number 9 is humans named Jesse and Nico. Number 3 is Whitney, and number 5 is Julissa. Julissa, you're winning all the prizes tonight. What the what? Congratulations. You must be awesome and oh so deserving. So our backstage team will message you all privately in the chat and confirm that we have your contact information so that you can get your goodies. Okay, there is so much you can do to continue to support the QLaw Association and the LGBTQ plus community. Thing 1 that you can do, support the Federal Equality Act and Washington SB 5313. Thing 2 that you can do, volunteer to mentor a law student or young attorney. Thing 3 that you can do, help us rate judicial candidates. And thing 4 that you can do, donate to the foundation, because that's what we came here to do, right? Donations are open until Sunday. And don't forget, the Remo platform will stay open here for a little bit, so you can stick around and kiki some more after the program. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for a really fabulous night. Thank you for giving me an excuse to wear a silly headdress and to put on lots of sparkle. Hey, gays, I appreciate the heck out of you. My name is Sasha Summer-Kuzno, and I'm just honestly really proud. I have a lot of pride, capital Pride, to have served as your MC. Have a good night.
I'm here live and I'm ready for our fabulous program to go forward, but I'm not a cat.